They say pleasure is the reward, but what if it's just a disguise? What if chocolate, parchment, lust, laughter, everything we call life, is just a cleverly disguised shadow, a sophisticated theater to hide something much more primitive and infinitely more painful? Let me ask you something, really with brutal honesty. When was the last time you felt complete? Not distracted, not satisfied, complete. When was the last time you took a deep breath and for a moment desired absolutely nothing? We live in the age of pleasure, but we are hungry, and this hunger is not for more stimulation, it is for less lies. Carl Jung warned, what we seek to comfort us is often what prevents us from healing. And maybe that's what no one has the courage to tell you. You don't want more pleasure, you want peace, but you've confused the two. Let's start at the beginning. Imagine the scene. You wake up, grab your cell phone before you even open your eyes properly. There is no emergency, no urgent joy, but habit is stronger than hunger. You scroll, you laugh, you forget, and you continue. A few seconds of dopamine and the day disappears, but the pain remains. You put down your cell phone, maybe eat something sweet, then something salty, or both, and then comes the guilt, because you know, even without knowing, that you weren't hungry. You just wanted to stop. You just wanted a break from the storm, but you didn't know what to call the storm. So you called it boredom. You called it anxiety. You called it desire. And this is where it all starts to fall apart, because what we call pleasure is almost never pleasure. It's relief from self-awareness. It's escape. It's denial disguised as reward. Jung said that each of us carries a shadow, a hidden self that we bury under distractions, and pleasure is the shovel. When I eat without hunger, when I scroll through my phone without curiosity, when I desire without connection, I am not choosing joy, I am numbing myself. And the cost of that is profound, because the more numb I live, the more I lose myself. Today, you will see pleasure with different eyes. Today, the mask comes off, and with it, maybe you will finally begin to find yourself again. And that reward remained. I repeated the pattern for years. Like someone rehearsing an invisible choreography, I kept dancing between stimuli, running away from what never had a name. I grew up, and my pain became unspeakable. My pleasures higher than my loneliness, higher than my fears, higher than the child in me who just wanted to be hugged. But no one warned me about one thing. Pleasure has memory. Every time I use it to silence the pain, I program my body to fear stillness. Silence becomes unbearable. That's why I can't stay in a room without sound, why I need music in the shower, why the constant noise of the world seems vital. But it's not life, it's escape. Carl Jung once said, "The things we seek to comfort us are often the same things that prevent us from healing." And I understand that now. Pleasure is not my enemy. The problem is the anesthesia it allows, because the more pleasure I consume to avoid the emptiness, the hungrier I become. And that hunger, that craving for quick relief, is the symptom of a soul that has been taught to fear its own depth. Before continuing, if this resonated with you, if you've ever felt that strange guilt after doing something that should have brought you joy, know that you are not alone. Comment below about the moment that most impacted you. It's not weakness to admit it, it's strength to bear witness. Imagine a person walking through the desert, chasing mirages. Every time they run after one, it disappears. But they don't stop, because they believe the next one will be real. That's pleasure when it comes without purpose. And here's the irony. Real pleasure, the kind that feeds the soul, is usually silent. It doesn't demand, it doesn't distract, it doesn't numb, it expands. It's in a deep conversation. It's in finishing something you were afraid to start. It's in waking up one day and realizing you no longer need what used to control you. But this kind of pleasure requires effort, intention, and that's exactly why we avoid it, because it's not easy, but it's the only one worth wanting. Carl Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid confronting their own soul. And pleasure is the most beautiful absurdity we have ever invented. Let's continue. Let's go back to the beginning. I am a child again. I fall, scrape my knee, I cry, and someone says, "Here, have a cookie. Don't cry." Or even, "Look, there's a cartoon. It's about to start." And in that moment, something is engraved in me. Not consciously, but neurologically. My brain learns a fatal equation. Pain equals punishment. Feeling is weakness, and pleasure is the solution. And then, I grow up. I grow up becoming fluent in distractions. Pleasure becomes my emotional translator. It speaks for me when I'm afraid to say, I'm not okay. It dances when I'm too tired to admit, I'm empty. It smiles on the outside when, on the inside, all I wanted to do was scream. But no one taught me that every time I replace emotion with stimulation, I lose a little more intimacy with myself. No one told me that, as Jung warned, when the inner world is ignored, the outer world becomes louder. And what is pleasure, if not that deafening noise? The scrolling of the screen, the buzz of notifications, the ping of messages, the urge to respond. All of it screams, just so I don't have to listen. Listen to what? Hear my pain. Hear the meaninglessness. Hear the hurt of being invisible. See, pleasure isn't bad. It's sacred when chosen with intention, but it becomes poison when it replaces presence. And here's a real, intimate, and perhaps painful question. Have you ever felt guilt after pleasure? After watching another episode? After sending that message you promised you wouldn't send? After buying something you didn't need? Eating when you weren't hungry? Or running into the wrong arms? That guilt doesn't come because you did something wrong. It comes because a part of you knows. It didn't fulfill you. It only distracted you from your hunger. This is where many people misinterpret Jung. They think that working on your shadow means becoming someone harder, colder, darker. But that's superficial. Working on your shadow means recognizing the moments when you betray yourself in search of relief. It means having the courage to look yourself in the eye and say, I see you. And today, I choose truth over escape. Let me tell you a story. It could be yours. Someone told me they couldn't stop falling in love, couldn't stop searching. They said, I'm incurably romantic, but all their relationships ended the same way. Intensity, obsession, collapse, repetition. When asked why, they replied, I just love to love. But that wasn't the truth. What she loved was the distraction, because when she was alone, the silence screamed. What she loved was the distraction, because when she was alone, the silence was too loud. And I understand that, because I too made pleasure a kind of sedative. I never learned to live with my wounds. So, like so many others, I turned pleasure into a band-aid, a routine, a habit, until one day I couldn't take it anymore, and I realized, this isn't rare. This is normality in disguise. It's the hidden story of millions of people. People who confuse longing with love, scrolling with joy, numbness with healing. People who never stop to ask themselves, why do I need this so much? Why is this click so urgent? Why does this pleasure control me? This is where the myth begins to crumble. Pleasure is not a cure. Pleasure is not peace. Pleasure is not power. Pleasure is just a tool. And tools, when misused, hurt. When used consciously, they liberate. I started to turn the tables, to observe, to test, and I noticed something curious. On the few occasions when I managed to postpone immediate pleasure, resisting that message, that click, that food, that impulse, something different emerged. Not just pride, but peace. As if I were saying to myself, I can resist and still be okay. And that, I realized, is freedom. Because discipline, in truth, is not repression. It is confidence. And confidence in oneself is the rarest euphoria. Because it does not need applause, does not depend on dopamine, does not demand approval. It just is. Presence. That's when pleasure began to change. It ceased to be a necessity and became a celebration. It ceased to be an escape and became a choice. I began to savor the pleasure that comes slowly, the kind that requires presence, laughter with someone I trust, food after honest effort, conversation where I am seen, not just tolerated. And then I understood what Jung meant by individuation. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole, about becoming someone who feels pleasure without using it as a band-aid, someone who appreciates silence without fearing it, someone who can be with themselves and enjoy their own company. But you don't get there by chasing emotional highs. You get there by turning down the volume, by listening to what's behind the compulsion. And that, as difficult as it may seem, changes everything, because it shifts the focus from the external to the internal, from noise to presence. So when I find myself seeking relief, I ask, what am I trying to avoid? And that simple, brutal question brings me back to myself, because true pleasure is not what numbs me, it's what reconnects me with who I am. with what I feel, with what matters. Now comes the hardest part, the part that almost no one wants to face. The truth that not only hurts, it destroys. Because to truly reclaim my life from false pleasure, I had to admit something scary. I betrayed myself, not once, but slowly, silently, daily. Every time I said, just 5 more minutes. Every time I pretended to be okay. Every time I avoided silence because it whispered too loudly. Every time I repeated, this is good for me, when deep down, it only helped me forget. But this realization isn't about guilt. It's about waking up. Because now I see, I wasn't weak. I was just surviving. And now I want to live. When I began to realize that most of my pleasures were never truly joyful, but rather emotional sedatives, everything around me lost some of its artificial shine. Parties no longer have the same effect. Social media no longer provides relief. Casual encounters don't fulfill me. Sugar doesn't silence the inner scream. Because the real pain was never the boredom. It was the absence of myself. Imagine your life as a house. Inside it lives your wounded child, your ignored truth, your unhealed memory. But instead of going in and facing that dark room, you build an amusement park in the backyard. Music, food, lights, entertainment. You party outside while your inner child waits. Invisible, alone. That is uncontrolled pleasure. A carnival outside the house of the soul. A celebration of escape, but healing. Real healing is when you decide to walk through the silence, walk through the door, sit on the floor of your memory, and say, I'm here now. You can talk. This is the work that Jung insisted on so much. He never wanted us to become addicted to stillness. He wanted us to stop being afraid of it. He wanted us to know that silence is not the absence of life. It is the presence of everything we avoid. And in that silence, I began to find myself again. I began to hear what was behind the distractions. My longing for myself, my desire for meaning, my weariness of running away. And the more I listen, the less I need. The more I face, the less I despair. The house no longer scares me, because I am the one who lives in it. And that is the beginning of liberation. Now comes the climax, the final myth that needs to be destroyed. I was taught that pleasure was the goal, that being happy was feeling good all the time, that the more I gave myself over to it, the freer I would be. But that was a lie. Freedom is not doing what I want. Freedom is not having to do it. True pleasure is not in chocolate, or scrolling, or an inflated ego. True pleasure is realizing that I no longer need to run away from myself. It is being able to sit in silence and smile, not because I am empty, but because I am full of presence, full of truth, full of myself. I have become someone who no longer seeks euphoria because I carry peace, and people have started to notice. They say I've changed, that I speak more slowly, take long pauses, laugh less, but more deeply. They ask me why I don't respond so quickly, why I stopped drinking, why I left social media, and I just smile, because they don't understand yet. I'm not avoiding anything anymore. I am finally present, and that scares them. Because when someone no longer needs pleasure to feel good, they become powerful, unshakable, uncontrollable. Addictions lose their power. Marketing loses its appeal. The world no longer dictates my pace, because presence has returned, and presence is the purest form of rebellion. Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are. And I'm not a dopamine addict. I'm not a collection of desires. I'm a creator of meaning, and meaning almost always hurts. Because it demands, it confronts, it demands total presence. So the next time desire arises, I stop, not to fight it, but to ask, what do I really need right now? That question changes everything, because it gives me back my pen. It reminds me, I am not my hunger. I am the one who chooses how to feed it. And if this message resonated with you, if it touched something that was dormant, then make it clear to the algorithm and to yourself. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who are still stuck in the noise. And if you feel that this content deserves to continue to exist, leave your support. Any amount strengthens this work and helps this message reach those who need to hear it most. Write in the comments, I'm back. Because now you're no longer running away. You are present, and no one can take that away from you.